Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by AIO Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to this week's Chasing Giants podcast, episode 234 on August 11th. Don, it's been a busy week for you. We're going to talk and unfold some pretty crazy, hectic schedules that you have. We got some kind of announcements just to go through, but you know, the last couple weeks we've been trying really hard to catch up on questions, and we know that's what people really like about our podcast is we get to answer listener-submitted questions. So our goal is not to get on too many political rants or anything like that and get down rabbit holes and get some of these questions answered. But let's real quick unpack this crazy week that you just had, because you're a little sunburnt. You got that red face, red forehead. I'm assuming that the legs are not red like your
They're
face.
Snow White.
Because
Snow White,
you were
Terry.
the only one on the lake in a pontoon boat yesterday with jeans on, I'm guessing.
Jeans and a life jacket at all times. In fact, they took a picture of me, and I had two life jackets on and around me. One was a vest, and I had that orange life jacket around my neck, and I had a life jacket on each leg. So I was not going to drown if I fell overboard. But you're right. It was a crazy week. I had, typically this is a slow period for me, and I think, the month of August, I ain't got much going on. And then, boom, every week just seems to fill up with different things, and this week was no different. So the first couple days of the week, Steve Shields showed up to video some stuff for the new web show, and we had actually two meetings. I wanted him to document some of the stuff with these meetings. I'm not going to go into too much detail because we don't have the details ironed out with either one of these groups, but it's all got to do with farming for nutrients. You know, we've been talking about farming for nutrients, getting the nutrient content up as much as possible in our food plots. And one of these companies, I've been using their products for 2 years and seen the results. And the other one is a newer contact, but I just applied some of their product to my food plots here this week. So I had meetings for 2 days, filming for 2 days, and I got a hot tip on a giant buck in Ohio. And I've done this before, and I believed the tip from the moment I got it. You could kind of tell when someone's BSing you, when someone's got enough detailed info that they're willing to back up, and that was the case here. This buck is easily over 220, maybe 230, wow. 240. And I definitely had to check it out. So I called a contact of mine in that area where this buck was supposed to be. He ran down some things for me and verified everything I'd heard from my original tip. And so I jumped in a truck and drove over, met Steve Shields halfway there because I wanted him to video document this thing if I'm going to hunt for this giant buck, and start knocking on doors for permission. There were certain properties that I felt I had a chance to kill that buck, and I knocked on all those doors, and I received permission from one landowner, but that landowner, I actually visited with him twice, 2 different days that I was there, and he indicated that there was probably 10 to 12 other people hunting his small property. He's one of them guys that would give permission to anybody that comes and knocks on his door. So, boy, the more I thought about it, I slept on it for a night, went back and seen him the next day, and the more I thought about it, I thought, my odds of killing this buck are very, very slim, probably 1% or less. And the more I thought about it, I before I left, I was running around dragging in trail cameras, cell cameras, and I was pulling in, gear, loaded up the truck, took a 4-wheeler with me in a trailer. I was ready to go hit the ground running over there. But the more I thought about it, I thought, you know what, you gotta consider the odds. And the odds of me killing that buck, it was a 6-hour drive from home. The odds of killing that buck were just so low that I didn't feel it was worth my time. Even though this is the buck of a lifetime, I wrote an article one time, know when to fold them. When you're playing poker, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And this is one of those cases where, as bad as I hated to, I went ahead and folded and threw the cards back on the table and drove home. So that was kind of my week. And then both my daughters and their families showed up for the weekend on Friday evening, and spent the weekend with them, including a day on the boat on Lake Shelbyville yesterday. And that was my week.
So when you walk through the highs and lows, because I'm guessing that when you're driving out there, the anticipation, the excitement, you're like riding a high of adrenaline, thinking of all the different twists and turns that you're going to have to navigate, but then coming to the realization that, I'm going to focus on something else.
Yeah, that's why I took Steve along. I thought, man, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. A 230, 240 bucks, and I'm just knocking on doors for permission and going on a wild tip that I don't even know is legit, although I did believe it and still do believe it. I believe 100% that it's accurate. Yeah, I had high hopes, and they were kind of dashed that first afternoon, evening that I was there, and knocked on some doors and was turned down for permission. I did get permission for the one farm the first day, knocked on a couple more the next day, and it really didn't bother me like it would have a few years ago, because we've talked about this before, and I've learned that when God closes a door, don't fight it. I literally could have stayed and hunted that one farm, and I already had a couple of stand sites picked out based on the area, and I didn't have the exact tree. I'd loaded up my truck with NutriCrave deer corn, because you can bait there in Ohio, and I had a plan for where I was going to put that corn, where I was going to put my stand. I was not going to hunt over the corn, but I was going to create a travel pattern from a bedding area to that corn. And I'll tell you, I went back and visited that gentleman that gave me permission the second morning I was there. And I left Steve at the motel. And I told Steve, I said, if I'm gone for 30 minutes and come back real quick, it's not a good sign. If I'm gone for a while, it's a better sign. And I actually came back in probably 30 minutes or less. And I think Steve was expecting me to be all bummed out and everything, but I wasn't whatsoever. I just, the way I look at it is that place was going to be a headache. I'd prayed about it on the way out, and as soon as I heard about the thing and everything, and asked God if I'm supposed to chase this deer, open the right doors for me, and if not, close them. I don't want to be wasting my time. And I just feel for some reason God doesn't want me out there this fall chasing that deer. Maybe the country's going to crash and he wants me at home, or maybe that buck would just lead to nightmares and headaches that I don't need to deal with. And I just feel that he was looking out for me, and I turned around and drove home. And I promise you, when I got out of my truck and home, I felt just as good as when I got in it to leave.
Yeah.
So it was an up and down situation, but the down wasn't nothing like it would have been a few years ago.
What were some of the reasons that when you were knocking on people's doors, they told you couldn't hunt? Just
mainly because they already had people hunting there. One guy did hunt himself. Another one, the property was owned by a group of people that hunted. And that was it. Nobody turned me down just because they didn't want me there. They all had somebody already hunting there.
Did they know you? Did anybody recognize you or know you when
I
you
don't think so. If they did, they didn't say so. And that's always kind of a thought in my mind when I go knock on somebody's door. Am I tipping off the whole neighborhood that there's a giant around? And they're going to say no, no, no. Then they're going to tell all their buddies there's got to be a giant here. And nobody recognized me on that trip. I like it that way, really. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't think either one of us have gotten too comfortable with being out in public somewhere and somebody recognizes. I had it happen down in Alabama this week 3 times, and it's still very uncomfortable. We don't like to be on the radar like that, to be honest with you. It's probably the least most appealing thing to our situation, isn't it?
It is, and I've done some stuff here recently to put myself under the radar. And it's funny, years ago when I was trying to build a business and everything, I was putting myself out there as much as possible, my logo out there, just all kinds of things. And in the last year especially, I've been going the opposite direction. I want to be low profile. And, one of the things I do is every time I trade trucks with Chris Yates, I get a different color. I want to make sure it's a different color truck than people are used to seeing me in. So I'm just doing anything I can to keep a lower profile these days.
That's funny. All right. Well, we got a couple more things to talk about before the questions, but let's take a quick break and listen to our friends from AIO. Again, a lot of positive feedback for our new Chasing Giants TV Mission Whitetail series. So we talked about that a few weeks ago with Joe. He's been out filming. You obviously, I still think that might be a fun episode for Steve to produce. You going out there looking for that buck. It might not be a hunt video, but it'd still be kind of a cool thing. But we got all the guys out filming right now. But as we mentioned, the partnership of Real World and AIO to run this show the first year is very appreciated. So Joe's got his major shipment ready for fall hunting season coming in here in just a week or two. There's all kinds of new products on his website. Some of the things I'm really, really happy about is he got the hand muff that you wear around your waist to keep your hands warm. And for you guys that like leafy jackets, he's got a leafy jacket that it will be in soon. So go check his website out at AIOgear.com, and we'll be right back.
AIO Gear has perfected one of the most innovative camo patterns on the market. The unique camo pattern designed to mimic the feather patterns of one of North America's greatest predators, the great horned owl. Combined with intuitive features, superior comfort, and ultra high quality fabrics give bow hunters the ultimate advantage. AIO has outfitted over 10,000 bow hunters across the country with over 1,000 5-star reviews. Visit ASIOgear.com to check it out for yourself. Use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off.
Well, Don, I had an absolutely awesome afternoon. The weather here in Kentucky the last 2 days, it's unreal for the month of August. It's low 80s. And we were trying to get a lot of work done. But a few months ago, or a few episodes ago, I guess, I mentioned that a good friend of ours was coming out with a new deer feeder that was going to change the game. And he's been working on this thing. His family has some engineering and fabrication businesses, so they've been working hard on it. We made the last modification to it today. And this thing's going to be hitting the market very soon. And for those who haven't put it together, it's our good friend Austin Razor who's coming out with this. And Austin and I partner in a lot of stuff. And I don't have anything to do with the feeder other than helping him. But Don, the prototype got modified, I think now 2 or 3 times. We have it production ready. We put it up today on the farm, and I put it side by side with a redneck 750-pound feeder, and this feeder is called the coonless deer feeder, and it's impossible for coons to get in it. And it's gravity feeder. It's going to hold about 1,000 to 1,200 pounds of feed, depending on what you have in it. But we got that thing put together, filmed an episode for the TV show, and going to run those things side by side to watch coons be able to crawl in one but not the other. So for those guys looking for a feeder, this thing's going to be on the market soon. I hope you'll hang out and wait for Austin to get his website up and get his pricing set. It's got a lot of really cool features that we worked on.
Well, Austin and his wife Ann are great people, and wish them nothing but success with this endeavor. And I'm sure it will be successful. You've been kind of guiding them along the way, and with your marketing and their product, it ought to be a good combination.
Yeah. So the couple things, I mean, you were just talking about Ohio. A couple of the last minute modifications we made is, say you had this feeder on your property in Ohio, don't have trappers or coons. Coons can't get up in it, so we don't, the amount of food that we waste, goes way, way down. But the other cool aspect we added to this is a sight gauge. So from your cell camera, you'll be able to, from Illinois, know when you're running low on feed because of the feed level, being able to see through it and be able to gauge when you need to go back. I think that's going to be a game changer for a lot of guys running in areas that aren't very close. So a lot of really, really cool features. I'll even post a picture of it here so people can see the side-by-side setup. And then, yeah, I got coon problems everywhere. It doesn't matter which farm here in Kentucky, and it's hard to justify buying a whole lot of high-protein feed or NutriCrave corn, and then the coons end up eating half of what the deer do.
Yeah, that's a big problem no matter where people are feeding. And you could pay for a feeder and just the money you save in feed. So
we were talking about that actually. Yeah, we were talking about that today. If you're feeding a protein feed in 2 fills of this feeder, you could pay for the feeder just with what you would lose to with raccoons. So I know there's a lot of guys that listen to this that are going to want to know more information about it. Again, Don or I don't have any ownership or anything in it other than we're just helping Austin, but he's going to have his stuff here. He's going to be at the Shipshewana show. I talked to the guys at the Shipshewana show that put his booth right next to the Lester's Feet booth because he's a board member for the Lester's Feet. That way, as Dan and myself and Austin are all there, we can kind of help and talk to people as they come by. But you'll be able to see it in person there. And his website will be up very soon. So the coonless deer feeder is coming to market very shortly. So we don't have pricing or anything yet. They haven't told me anyway, but I'm really excited for them. They're good people.
Yep. Look forward to seeing that when it releases.
All right. So, Don, real quick, let's just do an update about fall plots because I'm at a really big turning point here on August 11th. 2 of my soybean plots are still 6 to 7 inches tall. The tops have been just completely mowed off by browse pressure. There hasn't been enough rain to stay ahead with growth. I've made the call today that there's no way I can put mini pods on. I'm gonna terminate most of it and do fall plot. How's yours looking?
Well, not near as good as I wish they did, but they're looking better for sure. I think one thing that helped me is my neighbor had a double crop soybean field right next to me. And once those soybeans in his field started coming on, those young tender ones, there was a big shift from the deer on my place starting to hit his field instead of my plots. And that, along with some of the sprays and the Milorganite and things I've used, helped mine come along. Now they're not near as big as they should be. They're probably half the size they should be. But instead of being 3 feet tall, they're probably 18 inches tall. And so I'm going to go with it. So
if a listener's listening to this and they're in the same boat as me, do you have any advice on what's the line in the sand for still being able to put a lot of pods on? Is it the plant height? Is it the number of blooms that are on there that we can see how many beans that there's going to be? Because we got 3 choices. We can let the beans ride, just whatever they're going to be, they're going to be. We could broadcast in like some oats or some cereal grain or plot topper over it if it's thin enough and have 2 crops in it, or we could terminate the beans, till it up, or do a no-till with our drill for a fall plot. We got 3 options. Where do we draw the line on what to do?
Well, I think first of all, you need to wait until it's time to plant that fall plot. I've mentioned before the situation back in 2012 when we had the really bad drought, worst drought of my life, and my soybeans looked terrible. I went to Alaska for 16 days at the beginning of September, and when I came back, those soybeans had doubled in size, and that was in September. But the thing of it was, I was not getting browse pressure on those soybeans. So if your problem is browse pressure, and you continue to have that, I don't think there's any weather pattern that's going to come along that's going to salvage your plot. It's going to be a matter of you taking a look at those soybeans or whatever it is you're growing and seeing what they're going to produce. And are they producing enough that you want to leave them, or not enough that it's not worth keeping them, and then you'd be better off replacing them? And if they're worth keeping, then I'd be looking at overseeding, and then it's going to depend on if you used a pre-emergent herbicide and what that herbicide is going to allow to grow. So if you're going to overseed and you used a residual or a pre-emergent herbicide, I'd be looking at a mixture of cereal grains and brassicas. The cereal grains are a whole lot more likely to take than the brassicas are, but I would include brassicas as well, just in case. It might be a waste of seed, but at this point, you're doing everything you can to salvage your plot. And if you look at that plot and you know that the amount of grain or whatever it's going to produce is very minimal, it might be time to just terminate and start over. And to terminate, I would spray the plot with either glyphosate or glufosinate, Liberty or Roundup, and whichever one would be needed to kill that particular plant. And then I would work that soil, because, working up that soil will help you to get past that window of where your pre-emergent is going to hurt you. Stirring up that soil will help that the seed that you're going to plant as a recovery plot to grow and to germinate and grow and do better. So that's about the best advice I can see. It's a case-by-case situation, and folks are just going to have to take a close look at what they got and what they could possibly get by, overseeding or starting over.
Yeah. A lot of hard decisions for people, but we still got time to navigate it. And we've even shared some pictures on Real World's website or social media about people going ahead and planting. It's still way early, even for states like Kentucky that comes in on September 7th this year. So, well, I want to take some time and get some questions answered. If you don't have nothing else, we'll kick that off if that's all right with you.
I'm ready for the question. Let's fire away. The first one comes from Nick Essenmacher from Harbor Beach, Michigan. It says, "Hey Don, just going through trail cam photos and pondering on something. What makes a big buck travel from section to section? Have a picture of a nice buck that shows up every 10 days or so. Just was wondering what makes them travel like that. Thanks. P.S. You should look at what Michigan DNR did with our season. We can now hunt deer from October 1st till January 31st. Well, Nick, I'll start with your Michigan DNR. I don't see any reason in Michigan why they can't have a long season like that, although I think a good portion of that season needs to be antlerless only. You need to shoot some does, and I don't know what the season was before, but I'll tell you, adding those extra days to season is probably not going to make that big a difference from what I've seen in Illinois. What they need to do, though, is make a good portion of that season antlerless only to both get your buck-doe ratio more in line, but also to control the population. That's going to help you grow bigger bucks. Now, as far as the pattern you described of a big buck showing on a property every 10 days or so, I'm going to throw back that you very well could have that buck there more than you think you do, and you're just not getting his picture. I know on my place, I don't get bucks pictures near as often as I think I should, and yet I know they're here. So don't think that you're going to get a buck's picture every single day that he's on your place. He may be living there and you're only getting his picture every 10 days or so. So don't read too much into that. And I'm not saying that deer don't travel like you suggested. I think that's a personality trait. Just because one does don't mean they're all going to follow that same pattern. But my guess is that buck is there a whole lot more than you think he is.
Interesting. Well, like with the bucks that obviously like Smokey, you knew that he was there a lot. But for other bucks, I remember maybe, was it 2 years ago, 3 years, there was one camera that you didn't check. It wasn't a cell camera over on the west side of your property. You didn't know that a buck was even there until you checked one specific camera, and it was pretty much almost Christmas time at that point, and we'd already decided not to hunt because he wasn't there. And ended up he was. And that's on a property like yours.
Mm-hmm. I know exactly the buck you're talking about, and I know exactly the camera you're talking about. That's a great example. The buck was here. I had no idea, and I had, probably 8 to 10 cameras on the farm at that time.
That was the 5x6, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's, I think that we can run too many cameras sometimes, but we can also, no matter how many cameras we have, we can still not really know what's going on.
Right.
Ever had a terrible real estate experience? Average realtors usually spend more time selling themselves than on selling your land. They'll tell you anything to get the listing. They know that if they get the listing, you're stuck with them. Not here. Midwest Land Group has changed the way land is sold and is the only brokerage to offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee. That means if we don't meet your expectations, you can fire us. That puts all the pressure on us to perform. We don't just list land, we sell it. If you're looking to buy or sell property, don't before you talk to us. Visit us at MidwestLandGroup.com.
Interested to hear your thoughts. Continuing to pray for you both and your families. Well, Rich, there's absolutely no doubt that it's impacted the doe herd. If it's impacted the bucks, it's had to have impacted the does. The does produce the bucks. And you guys have heard me talk about the captive deer and how that captive industry has what they call superdos. And these superdos, what makes them a superdoe is that no matter which buck they are bred to, the sons that they produce are bigger than the father at the same age. So let's say you've got a captive buck that's 300 inches at 3 years old. His sons, if he's bred to a superdoe, will be bigger than 300 inches at 3 years old. And you can swap bucks. She can breed her to 10 different bucks for 10 different years. And those buck fawns that she has will always be bigger than the sires of those bucks at the same age. So, yeah, absolutely. Does play a huge role in genetics, and captive deer breeders typically give the doe at least 60% of the credit for producing giant bucks. So, yeah, it takes both sides, and scientifically, here's where we get into the science again, because, you talk to someone like Dr. Strickland, who's a scientist, he's going to tell you that the buck produces or influence 50% of the genes in an animal, and the mother or the doe is going to provide 50% of the genes. But it doesn't really seem to work that way with whitetails, or basically with any animal. There are some sires in the livestock industry, for example, that produce tremendous offspring that are even better than they are. And actually, I remember in the captive deer industry, there were bucks that were not all that impressive. Yeah, they were 200 inch, but compared to what else was available in the captive industry, they were not huge bucks per se, and yet they produced a lot of giant sons that were way better than they are. So yeah, I'm sure if I had any impact on the bucks on my property genetically, there also was an impact on the does genetically. Mm-hmm. And I think it makes total sense that those giant bucks that this farm has produced in recent years are not only are they breeding does on my farm, but they're also producing daughters or doe fawns that live on my farm. So no doubt about it, we can influence the buck genetics on a farm. At the same time, we have to be influencing the doe genetics.
Yeah, great question.
This one comes from Macy Cross from Petersburg, Tennessee. It's one of my favorite questions that we've ever got. She says, what is the best advice to give my husband that wants to kill a 150 but won't stop killing the 130s? Well, Macy, if I was you, I would make sure that once a week you tune in with him sitting beside you to the Chasing Giants podcast. And every time we say something and he's doing something different than what we're saying, you just nudge him with your elbow. And if you do that for about 3 years, he should start shooting 150s. But no, in all honesty, it starts, it's a mindset, really. If your husband is really disappointed and really in shooting 130s and he really wants to to raise the bar and start shooting 150s, it's all up to him. He's going to have to change some of the things that he's currently doing. And that goes for anybody, not just your husband, but anybody listening to this that wants to raise the bar. I don't care if they're shooting 150s now and they want to raise it to 170s, or if they're shooting 170s now and they want to raise that to 200s. It doesn't matter. What matters is if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you've always got. And if you want to raise the bar, you're going to have to change some things. And I can't say what your husband needs to change because I have no idea about him, where he hunts, how he hunts, anything like that. But he has got to change something in his approach to deer hunting. And the other thing is, when he does change some things, he's got to give it some time. You can't just raise the bar and automatically think, oh, well, I'm going to start letting 130s walk, and then magically 150s are going to appear. He's going to have to change his hunting approach, and then he's going to have to give that time. It's almost like relearning to hunt. And sometimes one of the hardest lessons is not learning something new, but is giving up something old. So he's maybe done something that's helped him shoot a lot of 130s that is never going to allow him to shoot 150s. Well, he's going to have to stop doing that. And sometimes that giving up something is just as hard or harder than, a new tactic or something, in his arsenal. So that's about the best advice I can give. What I'm really curious is the relationship that you and your husband have. I'm guessing it's a really good one, and that you could send a question like that, and hopefully you and him can listen to this podcast and laugh about it when I answer it, and hopefully Terry's got some advice to throw in there as well.
I think you're spot on, but my comment to it is that's what I like most about this TV show that we're filming right now that's going to be out soon, is there's a lot of different people that's going to be submitting footage that are at different parts of their journey or different goals. You're going to be, at a different place than somebody else that's submitting footage, and I think it's so relatable. There's going to be something there for everybody. So if somebody watches, a Don Higgins episode, they're going to say, I can never do that, or I want to do that. But then there's also going to be somebody that watches Dan Pfeiffer, a video that he's converting his property that he just bought first year from Wes's consulting plan. And there's going to be that, just the work that goes into it, whether he kills something or not. Brandon Epperson told me today, he was there helping us with the feeders, that his goal this year is to kill a 140 in 4 states. So, that's just something he wants to do. And there's going to be all different, Joe's going to shoot 642 bucks in 900 states or something like that. It's just how he does it. But I think that the team that we have assembled is so diverse that it's going to be something for everybody. So just like Macy and her husband, there's going to be stuff in that they can relate to through what they're at in their journey. So I'm excited about this. I think it's going to bring a new perspective to videos for people to enjoy and watch and hopefully learn something. So I hope that Macy is, she might not have told him she was going to ask this question. So that might be one of the things they're listening at the same time. And he's got that weird look on his face right now. You never know.
Yeah, she's probably sitting there with a big grin on her face, and he's probably sitting there with his head bowed down, with his hand in his forehead in his hand, wondering what did this lady just do.
All right, well, we'll get another question. This might take a little bit. This is another Bronson Strickland question. We've been getting a few of these lately.
Yeah, this is from Dan Schultz from Brillion, Wisconsin. It says, hello, Don and Terry. Thank you for committing to taking the time every week to host this podcast and help hunters like myself. My question is about the newest podcast episode on Deer University, produced by both Dr. Strickland and Dr. Damaris at the MSU Deer Lab, titled Predicting Antler Size from Doe Body Weight. To very briefly summarize, they discussed a consistent relationship between adult doe body weights and adult buck antler sizes. As doe body weights got heavier, the average adult buck antler size also increased. This would lead me to believe that the areas with the heaviest deer also have the greatest potential to produce the largest antler bucks. This got me to thinking, if Bergman's rule states that organisms in colder climates tend to be heavier, overlaps with the stress from cold winters limiting antler size, could we find the ideal latitude that would consistently produce the biggest bucks? Have you seen any pattern in your consulting visits to support this, and can you provide any insight? Well, I thought about this question a lot after reading it the first time, and then when I was going to pick out questions for this podcast, I dwelled on it some more. I hope the listener understands the point or the question. So Bergman's rule states that the farther north a animal lives, we're just going to stick with animals here, the larger the body size of those animals. We can talk about moose, for example. So there's three subspecies of moose. There's the Shiras moose that lives like in the Rocky Mountains. And then you move north and you get into the Canadian moose. And then you keep going north and you get the Alaskan Yukon moose. And the farther north you go, each of those subspecies gets bigger and typically has bigger antlers. With whitetails, it's the same way. You know, the smallest whitetails are the ones found the farthest south. You got the Florida Keys deer. Those deer are about the size of a German Shepherd dog. You know, they're small. I'm guessing an adult buck down there may not weigh much over 100 pounds. And then as you move farther north into Canada, you get the biggest bodied deer. 300-pound mature bucks up there, live body weight, is not all that uncommon. And the question is, how does the weather impact? Because the stress from the cold and the long winters up north also has a negative impact. So you got the positive impact up north of Bergman's rule. Those northern deer are bigger, so they're going to have bigger antlers. But then you got the negative impact of the cold winters those deer have to endure. So the question is, where is that sweet spot, that was it latitude or longitude, where those deer are going to grow the biggest? And where both of those factors, you know, are coming into play, but the negative factor is having less impact than the positive. And I think that we can look at the record books and we can see without a doubt that longitude, if you will, is the Midwest. You know, the Midwest has definitely much bigger deer than like the Florida Keys or Texas. We do not have as big a deer body-wise as Canada. However, we don't have the Canadian winters either. So I think the record book is where we go, and it clearly shows us that the Midwest is where those biggest bucks are. Now, I want to take it a step further because it's not equal across that longitude. Whatever that longitude is, from the West Coast to the East Coast, it's not going to be equal all the way across. And I think that boils down to the quality of the soils. So the soils in the Midwest are far superior nutrient-wise than the soils east or west of the Midwest. You can go to the East Coast, for example, and you're not going to grow the crops that you're going to grow or have the same yields with crops that you will have in the Midwest. Or you can go west to the Plains states, and you're not going to get the same corn yields, for example, soybean yields, as you are in the Midwest. So the Midwest is the perfect mix of Bergman's rule, mild winters, and the soils that are right in the middle of the country that are superior to those east and west. So, and this is all bore out by the record books. You can look at the record books and you can see where the giants coming from. They're coming from a strip across the Midwest, basically Kansas, Iowa, Illinois, Ohio. Indiana's producing giants. Basically from Ohio in the east to Kansas in the west, that strip through there. Now we can even bring in another factor, and that's how each of these states manages their deer herds. So you've got that sweet spot from Kansas to Ohio, but every state in that area manages differently. And the ones that manage the best are the ones that consistently produce giants. And my top three in that area would be Iowa, Kansas, and Ohio. And Illinois was at one time number one, but they're going down the toilet and slipping farther and farther each year. That's kind of a long-winded way of giving my opinion on your question. I hope it makes sense.
I think one time in a master class when Dr. Strickland was there, you guys talked about this a little differently, and it's if you lay out a soil quality map across the U.S. and then you overlay the record books, it's very, very similar, where the good soil, good farm ground, good nutrients, and where these giant bucks are taken. There's a lot of similarities in those heat maps, isn't there?
Absolutely. No doubt about it. And you can even take a map of showing where the soybean production is highest, where they'll color in each county based on soybean production. And those counties that produce the most soybeans are the ones that produce the most trophy bucks.
Very interesting. That's a good question, though.
Yeah, it was.
A lot of
It
thought
really made
needed.
me think and scratch my head just a little bit before I picked it. The next one comes from Caleb from Fredonia, Kentucky. It says, "Hello, Don and Terry. Love the podcast and all you'll do for the hunting industry. My question is, with the antler growing season being as early as it was, do you think the bucks will shed early this winter?" Caleb, I don't think it's going to have any impact whatsoever on when bucks shed. In fact, I'm certain of it. What will impact when the bucks shed is the stress that they're going to go through. I'm seeing predictions for an early fall. I've seen predictions for a pretty rough winter through most of the Midwest. Who knows? I see that every year. Whether it's going to happen or not, we don't know. But it's going to be stress that makes those deer shed early. It's got nothing to do with them starting the antler growth cycle a little bit early. They're going to shed based on how stressed they are. So I would not count on bucks shedding early at this point.
It's a tough conversation, and I think it goes back to we can overanalyze every single detail in it, but I think when it goes back to that conversation we had a couple weeks ago, when you have to understand that this year, outside of maybe some spring plots not performing well due to browse pressure, and we've been a little dry here and there, for most parts of the country, this is probably the best growing year we're ever going to have, at least. And making decisions about what you're going to shoot is going to be more complicated for people, I think. With I know there's a lot of people that come to Kentucky wanting to shoot a velvet buck every year. Our non-resident sales and people coming in wanting to shoot a velvet buck is really high, but it's always, I think, the first Saturday of September. Well, the way it falls on the calendar is we don't get to hunt until September 7th this year. So I think that's going to knock a lot of bucks out of the picture because so they start shedding right at the beginning of September. Usually by that second weekend, about half of the bucks have already shed.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I've actually seen bucks here shed in August. I think August 29th was the earliest I ever seen a mature buck shed and have photos of. But September 1, they're starting to shed. By the time you get to 7th, 8th of September, they're going to town. And each day there's going to be fewer velvet bucks than there was the day before.
Yep. But all right, that's a good question. We'll get to the number 6 here.
So this one comes from Matt Cross from Lynchburg, Tennessee. It says, besides keeping human intrusion down and playing the wind, what is your best advice for guys hunting mature bucks on permission properties that you cannot do any food plots or land enhancement on? Thank you for considering my question. Love the podcast. Well, Matt, if you was listening to the beginning of this podcast when I talked about driving to Ohio, I was in a situation just like you described. I was not in a position to go onto a property and start doing habitat work, planting food plots, anything like that. I had to take, what the property offered. And the number one thing I was looking for was lack of other human activity. And what caused me to walk away from that giant buck, which would, if I would have killed that buck, he would definitely be the biggest buck I would ever kill in my life. The kind that I dream about. and a kind that I hope one day I actually do get to shoot one like that. He had it all: drop tines, tremendous mass, non-typical points. He had it. What caused me to walk away from a dream buck like that was too much human activity on the property. So when you're stuck to hunting a private property that you can't do anything to, one thing you can do is walk away. And if there's too much hunting pressure there from other people, you're way better off to walk away than sit there and struggle through another season of being frustrated. Walk away and find a property, even if it's a small property, that does not have other hunters on it. That's the key. One other hunter could ruin a property very quick.
I think about the bucks that we've killed in Illinois. Aside from the 2 that I've killed on your place, all of them have been permission properties that we're not allowed to plant anything. And one of the things you started when you started taking me around to these properties years ago was find the bedding, understand how the bucks are using the bedding. And that's been our entire MO when we go to a permission property, is if they're not bedded on that property, you're likely not going to kill them unless it's the rut anyway. But you got to understand where that bedding is on those properties. If you can't plant, can't do habitat work, find your bedding and understand how the bucks are using it, right?
Yeah, bedding is way more important than food, especially the more pressure that's on a property. A buck, I don't care where he lives, he wants to be, when he beds down, he wants it to be the safest place he could find in his range. And that's the place you got to find. He can wait till it's dark, and he can stand up, and he can walk however far he needs to his food source. And that's what most of them do. If you got to kill him, you got to kill him where he's going to spend his daylight hours. And that's in bedding cover. It's not in a food plot. And I was just doing the seminar tour in New York and Pennsylvania here recently. And one of the questions I asked the crowd was, guys, think about this. I'm a guy selling you food plot seed, but let me give you this question. An entire archery season lasts 3 to 4 months, depending on the state you're in. So in that 3 to 4 month period, how many daylight hours is a mature buck standing in an open food plot? You could count the total hours on one hand in an entire 3 or 4 month season. How many daylight hours is that same buck in bedding cover all the rest of the time? If you want to kill those big ones, you got to hunt them where they spend their daylight hours. And again, I'm a guy selling you food plot seed. Own the food plot seed company, but I'm telling you, to kill the big ones, food plots are part of the puzzle. Don't get me wrong. If you've got a property, but number one is you got to hunt them where they spend their daylight hours. And if you own a property, you need to be managing that property, whatever it takes. You might have to enhance the cover. Maybe it's just getting the human intrusion off, but you got to manage that property in such a way that mature bucks want to be there when the sun's up.
Okay. Thanks for the question. This will probably be the last one of the night, but I'll throw it up on the screen for you.
This one comes from Jake Justice from Beaver Creek, Ohio. He says, "Hi, Don and Terry. Don, you previously mentioned you call all bucks 3.5 or older, which do not show signs of having 10 points or more. How literally do you mean this? If you have a 10 point with very little mass and short time length, would you have him culled or let him go to maturity? Also, what about an 8 point with great mass and time length, but only an 8? Thank you, Jake." This is another example that we talk about all the time where people take us literally. And I'm gonna explain how to look at this culling bucks from a totally different perspective than the clean 8s. I talk all the time about I want to cull those bucks. If they're still clean 8s at 3 years old, those are the ones I want to get rid of. So forget what I've ever said about culling bucks before and look at it from this angle. Let's say no matter how big your property, no matter how many bucks you got on there, you want to kill at 3 years old, you want to kill at least 2/3 or 3/4 of those bucks, but they need to be the worst. The top 25%, the top 33%, somewhere in there, I don't care how many points they got on their head. the best ones are the ones you want to keep. And if it happens to be giant racked 8-pointers, okay, that's a buck to keep. If it happens to be, if the cull buck happens to be a 10-pointer with 2-inch tines, cull him out. Most of the time on my place, the bucks that I'm culling are going to be slick rack, 8 points, maybe 9 points. We've even culled some 10 points. Forget all that. Think about, just look at the whole age group. This year, look at all the 3.5-year-old bucks on your farm and keep the top 25% to 1/3, 33%, and try your best to kill the rest of them. And it takes a lot of discipline to do that, but do that for about a decade and then come back and tell me what difference it made.
Yeah, it's a lot of challenges with that. It's limited tags, limited hunters, keeping intrusion down. The property that people have dictates so much of that. And we go back to your property being so special that you can, kind of do that strategy there and not put a lot of pressure on your place. But, when you start looking at my place here in Kentucky, if I was going to say I needed to take that many bucks off of it, it'd be hard just to get that many people out there, and I'm not going to turn them loose on my property. I'd have to be there. It'd be hard. So it's not an easy challenge for people to do this.
That's a great point, Terry, which leads me to this comment. I've got to stress again, like I try to always do when I talk about culling bucks, the majority of properties in North America, the majority of deer hunting properties in North America, you're going to have zero impact, none whatsoever. It takes a special property layout, and the better the layout, the better the results you're going to have. But to have any impact at all, most properties in North America, you're not going to have any impact whatsoever with a culling program. And the other thing I want to throw out there is what I'm preaching here is backed up by Dr. Strickland to the point that he even wrote a book about it. So it can work, no doubt about it, but it's not going to work for everybody.
All right. Great stuff. So what you got planned this week?
Well, I've got our youngest grandson staying with us this week, Bowen, 1 year old. So Robin and I are going to have our hands full. He actually doesn't turn 1 till the end of the month, but his mom and dad are going to Florida for 3 to 4 days, and first time for him staying away from home, and first time that we're going to have him staying at our house without mom and dad. So it's going to be an interesting week. And then I'm going to try to get my plots planted this week. We got some rain coming in, and I got a clover plot that I want to get in, and I'll probably just go ahead and do my deadly dozen plot as well with the rain coming.
Yep. How
about you, Terry?
I haven't looked at the forecast yet. I have to. I'll be in town Monday, but then need to run down to Knoxville for a quick meeting on Tuesday, and then I'll be back up here probably watching the weather. Like I said, I'm going to terminate quite a bit of those overbrowse beans and planting. So I don't know that I'm going to plant this week, but start getting everything ready. I want to redo a clover plot myself, but keep an eye on this feeder. Hopefully laugh at a lot of coons trying to get in this thing that they can't. But pretty light week this week.
Yeah, it's a little bit early from what I would typically plant my plots, but the weather predictions that I'm seeing are calling for an early fall, and I'd rather be just a little bit early than a little bit late, and you never know what you're going to get into. But if you can time those fall plantings right ahead of a rain, that's really important. And with the rain in the forecast, I think it's time that I go ahead and plant.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to throw that out there because I know a lot of people have heard me say September 1st along Interstate 70, which is where I'm at. And as you move north or south an hour anyway, then if you're moving north an hour, you want to go a week early, or 100 miles. I put it that way as well. So yeah, it's a little bit earlier than I typically would plant, but with the weather patterns and predictions, I just think it's time to do it with the rain coming on.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening and watching. We're going to keep filming, keep you updated as far as when the show's going to release. We got everybody out doing it. Steve's starting to produce the shows. It's going to be a blend format of more vlog stuff about what we're doing, when we're doing it. And then we got some hunt shows that are already in the bag from previous years that we'll be producing and putting out there here in just a few weeks. So look forward to everybody seeing those. We got a lot of good feedback from people who listen on the audio platforms for the Sunday night prayer time. They hadn't been able to listen to those before. So after the closing credits, if you want to stay on and listen to that, our friend Eric Perry did this week's and talks for a little bit. Hope you guys enjoy that. And that's all I got this week.
That's all I've got. So God bless everyone. Hope you guys have a great week.
Take care.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by AIO Camo, Buy a Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.